I want y'all to give a thumbs up. We have an amazing, amazing social arts entrepreneur. Give it up for Nina Asimakopoulos. Woohoo! Yeah. So check it out. Just so you know, I know that I've told you a little bit about her earlier this week, but she's awesome. She's internationally acclaimed. Okay, she's got over 85 international world premiere performances, 5 solo albums. Most recent one, she has an album called Vayu, which was selected for the first round of the Grammy nominations for Best Classical Solo Instrumental. She's the recipient of numerous prestigious grants and awards. She's a flute professor at West Virginia University, and she has a unique leading voice in the classical music world who pushes the boundaries of performance with works that really integrate multiple art forms. And, you know, there's been several quotes. Actually, the Rochester City paper has said, in the hands of Nina Asimakopoulos, or Nina A, is a kite, a nymph, a bolt of lightning, particularly how she plays the flute. And also the American Record Guide actually said, attention, flute world, here is Nina Asimakopoulos, an artistic force to be reckoned with. So one more time, let's go. Woo! All right. What is up, Nina?
I said, what an opening. What an opening.
Hey, you know, I do that for everybody. It's awesome. Anyways, I just mentioned artistic force, and it got me thinking, what is an artistic force, right? I mean, they called you an artistic force, the American Record Guide, right? And so I'm just trying to understand, what does that actually mean in the context of social music entrepreneurship? And, you know, what do you think makes you an artistic force to be reckoned with when you are given a flute, right? To put in your hands like a kite, like a bolt of lightning, like a Zeus. Like, what are we talking about here? What is that?
Well, first, I want to go on the record as being the person to be quoted as saying that you are an artistic force to be reckoned with, certainly. And I think in your hands, the flute is a rocket. So put some quotes around that. But
I'll be talking with Elon Musk in a second. It's okay. Right. We'll figure that one out.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciate about both of those quotes is I'm not being pigeonholed as a flutist in either quote. You know, the quotes refer to, you know, sort of how I use the medium of the flute to make a kite, a bolt of lightning, and, you know, like you said, an artistic force. And so I guess I would say that, you know, how those quotes resonate is, first of all, in terms of, you know, the flute, I love to take sound and sort of bring it into the canvas of space and make it come to life. Of course, we have the breath with the flute, but this concept of shape shifting with sound, you know, considering a kite or a bolt of lightning, and then connecting to its essence. Well, what is a kite? What does a kite look like? What's the form of a kite? You know, and then how do you take breath and this medium of the flute and this canvas of space and create this essence of kite out of sound?
Sure.
And that's one of my passions. I love kind of, you know, going into the flute and you know, like searching for fragments of vastness or potential in the interior of the sound, and then like kind of putting it out into the canvas of the space. And, you know, bringing the composer's vision to life, you know, where we have the little notes on a piece of paper and you could take that paper and crunch it up and throw it away and nobody would even ever hear the sounds. And, you know, like not just painting by numbers by playing the notes, but adding color and texture and shape and again, capturing these essences and bringing them forth. And I think like virtuosity and versatility is a big passion of mine too, that it's not just about, you know, technical virtuosity or virtuosity as we understand it and have understood it traditionally, but really like this form of virtuosity, it's about versatility and breadth of what you create, which is connected to entrepreneurship, you know, for sure, the sense of like
absolutely
and versatility.
Absolutely. You know, in this class, one of the things that we've talked about are stages of entrepreneurship. We talk about ideation and then the organization of different ideas, and then actually creation. So we're putting it to the test. So we have this idea that we have to manifest it, which is, I guess, maybe in a neurological sense, it's called cognitive translation, what we're talking about. I actually did my my dissertation on imagery, on mental imagery, and how we actually translate the imagination. And so what you're talking about kind of falls within the realm of semiotics, you know, representational descriptors or resembling descriptors. And so what you're talking about is you know, to be a force, meaning to be an influencer of society through the power of art, which is what we do here, right? We talk about the influence and the impact of arts entrepreneurs. I think you mentioned a very important thing, and everybody's witnessing the fact that you are basically discussing the most fundamental part, which is what is an artist and how to be an artist, you know. And now you're defining these characteristics, these traits that are associated oftentimes with artistry, such as virtuosity and versatility. And so in entrepreneurship, we call that adaptability, right? Or even translatability, the ability to be able to find connections with the world that oftentimes might want to divide so much and say, well, you belong here, compartmentalize and say everything has its own thing. But I think what's really fascinating about the way you approach things, Nina, is that you, from my observation, correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to find all these connections with different fields, whether it's even closely related, maybe within the arts or even non-arts related, but you just find it all intertwining. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think, you know, you asked like, what is an artistic force? And you mentioned some aspects of entrepreneurship. And I think at the core of everything for me personally is authenticity, you know. And how does that break down? It breaks down in terms of like, well, knowing yourself, giving yourself the space to kind of go inside and be like, well, what is it that's seeking to emerge? You know, what is the voice inside of me? And, you know, we put all these like boundaries on these voices, and we're raised in these structures, and we're taught to paint between the lines, and that's all very, very valuable. But like authenticity, I think for me is like at the true essence of what an artistic force is. Because if you think about it, like what is more amazing than to see new things come forth? And how do new things come forth? By each individual like following that muse. And so voice is really important, you know, openness of being, like being in touch with like what's seeking to emerge, and like flying your freak flag. And if you don't have a freak flag, you know, flying whatever kind of flag you have. And hand in hand with that really goes courage, because you have to like be willing to like explore your shadow side, or you have to be willing to step up to doing something that's kind of crazy, or that might, you know, get ridiculed. And where do you put that? How do you organize the critiques of others when you create new art, or you put your art out there? Is it even important? You know, and if it is, like, where does it go?
We could just hold on one second. You just dropped a lot of amazing stuff right here. You know, one of the things that I've been teaching this class and even other classes beyond, first, let me just kind of recap and translate what you have been saying is just an affirmation of what is being taught. So for example, you know, artistry is essentially humanity expressed, but the way you're describing, you know, the essentiality of pursuing authenticity, right, as opposed to vanity metrics, for example, that is so important in order to have any viable chance of having company security, sustainability, leverage, scalability, et cetera, et cetera. And you talk about authenticity, and I just think, you know, oftentimes young aspiring entrepreneurs, or just you know, novel entrepreneurs, doesn't matter what age you are or what, you know, young is relative, right? But no matter what, people oftentimes, they worry too much about trying to be a carbon copy, as opposed to being in touch with, like you said, who you are, what makes who you are, and what are your interests, what do you stand for, what you might not stand for, which is, and in doing so, you have embraced authenticity, because like, you know, you're not even, what happens with entrepreneurs that end up being successful, we could define that in many ways, but I think the best way to define it is to be in the path that you're called to be. And, I find it's so interesting because oftentimes people want to kind of compare and to compete and kind of think, okay, well, this is my competition. But, the best way to actually have longevity and to make impact is when you separate yourself from competition. And the only way you can do that is by embracing your identity before pursuing a purpose, which is an external expression, and then expressing the purpose through various roles, which you have done through music, through hydrology, through dance, and et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah, I'd like to come back to a phrase that you use that I have never heard. And I'm like all about this. You said vanity.
I taught you a word. This is
no,
cool.
You taught me two words that go next to each other that I'm going to be putting next to each other. Okay, you said vanity metrics. I've never heard that, and I love it. And in response to what you just said, I have a few really important things to share. One is that it's really important to be in touch with the seasons in your life, and that's part of authenticity too. And I do, as a teacher and as a parent and just as a human, and myself having been a younger artist, I do think that there is a time and a season and a place to emulate, and that it is part of our maturity and maturation process to wonder, what is our place in the world, and is that person going to take our place from us because they're better than us, and also, I think metrics are really important. Metrics have a function, and in classical music, we're raised, and also in jazz, any kind of music, there are performance traditions, and these traditions are really important. You have to learn how to paint between the lines. You have to learn how to have vibrato. You have to learn how to finger the notes. These are all traditions that are to be valued.
Product development. Essentially, it's right. Product development. Yeah.
And that's all really important. And, maybe you come to a point and a period in your life, or maybe you have seedlings kind of sprouting up as you're learning all of this. Well, here's an F, but what happens if I do this with the key? Oh, that's a cool sound. You can be 10 and exploring your instrument. And those are the seeds of authenticity. And what's important as a teacher is not to ever squelch that, and in ourself as well. So I do think vanity metrics are, I don't know what that means, but if it means
with that, yeah.
You're
cool.
Your marketing, how you market yourself, your branding, all of that's really important. Yeah. It serves a purpose. And resumes are important. But it's awesome when you can kind of not believe in your own PR in the end, you can play the game, play the chess game, get all the metrics in order, and then come to a point where you're really more interested in seeing it. And this would be the crux of it, understanding how all of that is a tool and can feed something greater. And that thing that is greater is really what is seeking to emerge from you as an artist.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I love about your work is that you don't pursue vanity metrics, and it is defined. It is a definitive thing. I mean, if you look it up, essentially, it's this whole concept of people trying to find validation by the amount of views, especially in social media. That's what vanity metrics is. And so when you think about the etymology of the word vanity, most people don't realize this. It actually means emptiness.
Really? So, I love that.
So things that are, that's what's really amazing. The students here know that I'm kind of like an etymology guru or nerd, I should say. Maybe not a guru, but just I'm a geek for it. And it ties in with imagery and all that stuff, right? Which I did my dissertation. And you and I happen to be synesthetic. So there's parallels with all this stuff. But you said something which is, that's all good, the marketing aspect, essentially the quantitative data and all that stuff, but it's more important to pursue purpose. I would say this is the marketing aspect, the product fit, the product, the proof of concept of your work should come only after you have solidified your identity and secured your purpose. And I tell the students that, in entrepreneurship, purpose is self-directed. It's actually the opposite way. It's understanding how you can utilize who you are to be able to empower others. And if art is humanity expressed, then artistry are those skills, those competencies, those tasks that might even be competitive or expertise, but that are used in a way that actually empower other people to express the best version of their humanity. That is what artistry is, at least in the context of entrepreneurship in this class, right? And so what I love is that you always have a purpose with your work. And I showed the students some of your work, but I'd love for us to just kind of maybe segue, because a lot of people know you as the world-renowned flutist, but you got documentaries with you dancing and doing all kinds of amazing stuff. But like most recently, you have the Hydrology project. So it kind of leads to my second question, which is, could you talk about the Hydrology project? What is that? And, maybe the first piece that is going to be released soon, which is called Lucid Dreams, the life cycle of an artist. I'd love for you to kind of share with the students what you actually do. What is Hydrology project?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I love this project. This is a passion project of mine. I think it's going to last maybe, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years. Basically, it's a project that explores underwater movement, also underwater sound. I've submerged a flute. Yes, I have a stunt flute. I don't take my $20,000 flute underwater, but recording the sounds that the flute makes when you blow into it and bubbles come out of the keys, and you alternate the keys, and little parachutes of bubbles come up. And so there's videography, there's photography, there's sound that's being collected of me singing underwater, breathing sounds, because when you submerge, breath is a huge component of going under, especially 16 feet down at the bottom of a diving well. Breath holds, sort of the science of breath holding and its connection to creating sound through breath, not only our voice, but
I just want the class to understand why you are the guest today. And I know when I reached out to Nina, she's like, what do you mean? Like, how does this relate to the course or even the topic?
Well, I was wondering about social impact.
Of course, but social impact actually starts with being secure in self and being aware of a particular focus. And like, the thing is, you are trying to essentially master yourself, and understand the depths of your humanity. And it's really amazing because this unit right now is called the preservation of humanity. You happen to be our preservation of humanity speaker, because like what you're talking about is like,
creating
art and creating all this stuff underwater.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. It's
it's control and focus and the far transfer skills. Maybe you could talk about that. How do you think about like the skills and then far transfer them into things that have nothing to do with the Hydrology project, but might actually help improve just the way you interact with people in life?
Well, okay, hold on a second. Calm down. That was like 15 things. So, first of all, I'd like to just say something about art in general. And that is that, it's like one vocabulary, whether you're playing the flute or you're painting or you're dancing or whatever, you've got movement, you've got line, you have dimension, you have form, you have hue, saturation, like, a storyline, you have something that's representational, something that's not. So, one thing that I hope I get to talk a little bit about is kind of how I came into this project and its impact in my life. But being underwater and moving with fabric, and I'll show some pictures soon, and then studying that movement on film and connecting it to sound and music is so much like playing the flute, and in fact, it has really inspired so much in my flute playing, because there are some really important lessons that I've learned from being in underwater and dealing with water. Okay, so I see that you've pulled these pictures up here. I'll go ahead and describe this. So if you go to ahead and scroll, or would you like me to screen share, Jose, so that I can?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Here we go.
I'll grab the screen here. Okay, so basically, here's some images from the project. So talking about this particular piece, Lucid Dreams, it's it's called Lucid Dreams: The Life Cycle of an Artist, and it goes through archetypes. Okay, so you have the inception and the gestation of an artist, and that's what we're looking at here. This and I have something like, I think, 40,000 images and 30 hours of film that is going to go into this 12-minute film. So it's a film that will be presented on stage that tracks the life cycle of an artist. And all of the music, the soundtrack for the film, is all going to be created electronically from sounds produced by the flute underwater, as well as my voice underwater, breathing sounds, water sounds. It will all be manipulated to create a track, which will be a fixed media track. And then on stage, I will perform under the screen, live, with amplification coming from bowls of water. So the bowls of water are going to be set up as speakers and amplifiers of sound. And that's what the Lucid Dreams piece will be, and that will be premiered in April. So what we're looking at here is sort of the life cycle of an artist. So we have the gestation. What's interesting about this image is how it morphs into sound waves. Let's see if I can move this. So some of the animation for some of these images will make a connection between the reflections in the water and how they mimic energy and force and sound waves. And then, so the artist sort of starts to awaken. That's an image from here. And then there's a call, right? So there's a sort of inception, this desire to grasp and to find a tool for self-expression. And so there's a series of images and some video that will be presented. And here's an image. And all of these images were all shot underwater, obviously, which is why my hair is up in the air. And very complicated rigging system, a lot of learning about how to submerge, 800
gracefully
800 feet of fabric, and because it's all shot with black fabric underwater, and just rigging flutes floating. And here you see that the artist is grasping, kind of awakened to a tool, but then that tool maybe doesn't define us. We're not flute players, right? So it just becomes evident for the artist that there's more beyond this tool. And so here are just a few more images. And then after impulse and awakening and call and initiation, there's this series of warrior and lover archetype, where you come into this experience in your life as an artist where you're in love with what you're doing, and you're experiencing love, and you've got the tools to create and do so much with what you're doing. And so there are a series of images related to that. And and then the sort of the warrior scene where you have to fight, Artemis, for example, goddess of the hunt. How do you hunt down your career? How do you craft we talked about metrics. How do you use metrics as tools, as weapons, as a way to get where you're going? And then battling like challenges, like battling self-esteem, or battling where's my place on earth, or battling disappointments when you don't get to do what you think you're supposed to be doing or want to be doing. And then the artist moves into this dark night of the soul, which is something I hope I get to speak a little bit more about today if there's time. If not, we have a part 2 coming.
Yeah, please.
But so for me recently, I had a playing injury, and I haven't talked much about it publicly, but I mean, it really put me into a place where I had to struggle with like my identity. Am I a flutist? Am I an artist? Or am I just a person? What is more important about my essence, and who am I? And so this series goes into this dark night of the soul, where we have these deeper challenges, these spiritual challenges of and experience like agony in a sense. And so here's some images from that series. And then
Wow.
the artist, realizes, and a lot of these look like paintings. I've heard many people say, oh, it looks like Michelangelo, right? So as the viewer is looking at this film, they're going to probably naturally be making this connection to this figure. It looks like a painting. And then my hope is to kind of break through the fourth wall at this point in the sequence of the film and challenge them, and basically say, did you frame me? Have I framed myself? Am I a noun? Am I a flutist? Am I an artist? Or am I a human? And so there's this series of pictures and videos where the artist is breaking through this concept of being framed. And the video section of this is pretty powerful. And there's a sort of reaching through.
Wow.
And, bubbles play a big role in the soundtrack for this piece, and also breath and this concept of spirit. So that's sort of a leitmotif that kind of keeps coming back. And then there's the phoenix rising, right? So after you reach the dark night of the soul, then there's this sort of, how do you rise up out of the ashes, and what comes out of that? So we have a couple of images from the video shoot of this figure. And all of these garments, by the way, are garments that I've created, and they have come out of a lot of research underwater, because there's some fabric that does not move well underwater, and there are ways to create these. Yep. And then there's the phoenix, and eventually,
Oh, cool.
Eventually the last one that I don't have on here, and I just actually shot it last week, is the sage. And so that's the final archetype of like after this life cycle, right? Like when you think of tarot cards, for example, it's the fool's journey. It starts you off somewhere, and there's this huge cycle of life that every card takes you through. And so finally it's the sage, and it's like embodiment. And basically that's the project. I've learned so much working underwater. And like I said, a lot of it is it's art. And so whether you're playing the flute or moving fabric or creating a line with, the way you use your breath on the flute, or whether you're moving your arm underwater. So that's a little bit about the project.
No, that's absolutely amazing. I'd like to just real quickly, I'd like to actually just share your painting gallery on your website, just so
Sure.
they can actually see that aspect of what you do as well. This is what's so cool. Look, check it out. This is some of Nina's paintings. Is there any connection between this and or common themes between that and the hydrology?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought these up. If you scroll up to the painting of my son, for example, or my daughter, if you want to click on that. So here's an example of following the rules, right? This is the very representational art. You know what you're looking at. There's a person, there's a window, there's a book. And so in order to accomplish this, you got to sort of paint between the lines, but then you go inside of that framework, inside of those metrics, and you find those fragments of vastness with how you handle color. If you zoom out and you go to one of the abstract pieces, for example, if you want to hit that orange one that's up a little bit more above my son, yep, that orange, yeah, that pink one, yep. So, I mean, this is completely abstract. And yet the elements are really the same. You've got line, dimension, form, but you're looking at it in a different way, and you're handling it differently. And that's similar to what I was saying about art. It's just one language, really, or many dialects in a sense. So, yeah, I mean,
that's awesome. And that's amazing, because what you just did right now is you just expressed intentionality for even creating, and I think that's so important for all of us as aspiring entrepreneurs. I actually say I formulate my own definitions that make it at least maybe easier for me to process, but definitely for those who are learning about, entrepreneurship or even music entrepreneurship or arts entrepreneurship, I say that entrepreneurship is the intersection between creative solutions and missions. So there's entrepreneurship right here, because a lot of people can create and come up with solutions, but might not necessarily have a mission, a target audience, or maybe even an impetus. Like, what is it that we're trying to convey? And if you don't have that mission, you can't actually create something that has meaning, because something that has meaning has to have a continuation or a purpose to be able to ameliorate that particular entity. And so that's really cool how it's like everything that, at least that what I've noticed, and I'm sure the other students have here, is everything that you're doing has an objective to get us to really think and to reflect. And it's not just to impress. I mean, sure, your art is impressive, but I think more than that, it doesn't even impress me. It impacts me,
Yeah,
it influences, it inspires me.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on something that you've said a couple times, and the sort of like mission. First of all, it doesn't start that way, at least for me. And if you look at if you look at abstract painting, for example, this is how it goes. You dip your paint, you brush into the paint, and sometimes all you do is go "Wah!" all over the canvas. And then you step back and you go like this, you go like this. Sometimes you turn the canvas upside down, and then you kind of notice. And then maybe you take your paintbrush, you dip it in red, and you close one eye and you move that dip of pigment in front of the canvas, 6 feet away, and you decide, where do I think I want this red? And then you walk up to the canvas and boom, you dab it on. And then you respond to that. And then you respond to that. And that's how this hydrology project was. I didn't plan this whole thing out. I wasn't like, I'm going to make this impact, basically, the way it started for me was just, we were supposed to social distance 6 feet. And I'm like, well, why not 16 feet? And I'll do it underwater. So, I'm being funny, but because I think that is funny, but in reality, it was like, I'm in a water phase of my life. I live in a state that is rich with rivers. I've come into whitewater kayaking and made amazing friends and met beautiful people and been impacted by their spirits, and and water is like flute playing, and suddenly it's like, well, maybe I'll go in the pool after seeing a video of somebody kayaking underwater. It's called squirt boating, and it's like, well, if they can take a boat underwater and move, then maybe I'll go in a pool. And then suddenly I'm filming it, and then I'm responding to that, and suddenly there's this sense of being in the womb, and then I'm like, the life cycle of an artist.
Yeah, no, this is actually really brilliant, because there's different ways to actually express entrepreneurship as an artist, right? And so I tend to actually want to address a need of an individual and then create the content to be able to ameliorate that need. But what's so cool is how you and I relate, but then the process is reverse. But I value and appreciate and respect wholeheartedly, and would support anybody to do that process as well, because it's so important as well. And it's what you're talking about, the creative process. And there's stages to that. There's actually a professor emeritus at Michigan State University, John Kratis. He says stages to creative process. It starts with exploration, which is essentially the way he defines it is what you just did before we improvised, because then you started improvising because you start seeing what you can work with, and then it's all about the permutation of those ideas. But before, you have to actually just explore. Then it's improvisation. Then once you have that product, you have the documentation or the composition, and then you get to the point where you are at, where it's just like, well, you're just having fun, you're exploring, and you're trying to discover new things, new beauty, new wonders. But then ultimately, it's how do I convey this to the world so that it could actually provide meaningful value and transformation for other individuals. But I've noticed it's almost like you embrace a spirit of a child, uninhibited. And so maybe one question that I would ask is, context. entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, what they ultimately want to do is the hardest part is to actually come up with the idea, to come up with the actual creation of, what is it they want to do. So what recommendations might you have for actually getting in that spirit, so that you don't look at just a blank canvas and not know what to do, or just like the Microsoft Word document or whatever it is, maybe the sheet music, and just like you don't have anything? How do you get to that state where you can be free in your expressivity in creating?
Yeah, oh my God, that's just, whew, that's huge. Well, first of all, the first thing that came to mind, two things came to mind immediately when you asked the question, and I'll kind of dissect them and then maybe add some more things as I think. But the first word that came to my mind is muse. And the second word that came to my mind is space. So let me talk a little bit about those two, and then I can answer the question hopefully in a way that's helpful, more helpful for the students in other ways. But like, in terms of space, like, we don't have a lot of space in our life, I think, in general, right? And so it's about creating space, quiet space, not just creating it, but like guarding it, fighting for it, that warrior side, like, protecting it. And again, that comes back to authenticity, and it comes back to voice, and it comes back to courage, and what are your values, and really like, creating like a space for what wants to emerge, to come out. And what is it? It's your voice. Every one of us has a unique something. And so I would say space, and many ways of kind of approaching space and thinking about space. And the second one is, finding your muse. So like, it's hard to have a muse. Like, I'm so grateful when a muse comes into my life, and that can be a person, it can be a sound, it can be art that you've seen, experience you've had. And so when the muse enters my life, like, I like grab it by the ankles, and I try not to let it go, because like it can go like this. And in the end, the muse is really always inside of us anyway. So even if we're inspired by a person and they become our muse, and then they leave and we've lost our muse, in reality, that has to be checked, because that whole experience of the energy of the muse and inspiration is still all inside of us. It's in our head, it's in our heart, it's in our, the chemical cocktail of our blood. And so that aspect of muse and is really important. And getting charged. I mean, like, what charges you? Getting charged by seeing art, by experiencing art, by taking notes, by having these experiences, great conversation, and then managing that energy. And entrepreneurship requires like dexterity. It requires courage. You said something about being like childlike. Yes.
Uninhibited.
It requires
you have to be courageous.
Yeah, openness. And I don't know about uninhibited, because inhibitions are there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
If you go down 16 feet underwater, like, one of the most important messages or lessons I've learned, and we'll talk more about this in part 2, but like, is like dissecting and separating the reality from the dream. So when you go 16 feet underwater, and you prep your breath for a 1 minute breath hold or a 2 minute breath hold, and you're down there with fabric that could like choke and kill and cause you to like literally, like, I've had experiences with fabric that I thought were going to kill me. Like, there is a reality to that. But you have to also hold in the same space this sort of dynamic balance between this reality and the dream of the experience and the image of it. And so that's where, like, yeah, getting organized and having a shot list, or having like, here's how I'm going to accomplish my entrepreneurial vision, but then being in the spirit and the essence of what you're trying to create. A movement underwater that looks completely like those images. I look like I'm having fun. half the time I come up and I'm like, you know, there's just like massive, like, it is. And it's hilarious because when you see the videos, it's like, I'm like floating around and then it's like,
Oh man,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
that's awesome. No, that's,
yeah.
you know, you touched on some very important things. Um, One of the most important things that you mentioned uh, was this reality that oftentimes aspiring entrepreneurs fail to do, which is to be able to distinguish the difference between dream and reality. And it's, we can pursue dream, but then I notice how you talk about the organization of, you know, tasks that need to be accomplished in order to fulfill that dream. And it reminds me of Denzel Washington. You know, he was speaking to a group of students and he said, your dreams without goals will fail you. You know, and another quote that I've heard before is dreams or goals are dreams with a deadline. You know, and so even you might have a dream of what you want to create, but there's a deadline and you
Yeah,
got to meet it before you're dead. You know, you
yeah,
don't want to die underwater necessarily in the pursuit of your dream. And so many people do, and that's the reason why a lot of sole proprietorships, you know, partnerships, corporations, you know, or just even artists in general, they never reach the full potential because you have to. What I see in you is that you know how to, or you've uncovered how to find balance, if that even exists, or maybe ebb and flow, you know, to kind of go
yeah.
with the whole concept of water, life being an ebb and flow, and knowing just when to prioritize or know when to actually create that space, which is so essential in order for you to actually facilitate creative thinking and doing.
Yeah, well,
That's just my response. I don't know.
yeah, no, two things that came to mind. First is you also have to need to know when to let a project go. And
Mm.
and that, poof, I could just talk about that. Because when you're the type of person who's sparking ideas constantly, you know, it's like hard to be in a head like this sometimes. You know, sometimes it's like, well, you have to understand that a project is much like a pregnancy. Like it
Mm,
goes through a period of just, it's like the lucid dreams. It's a
sure.
trajectory, you know, it's the excitement of like, oh, what a great idea. And then the next step, and then there's the morning
Sure.
sickness, and then there's the oh, and then there's a sciatic nerve
Yeah.
issue, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've just had two kids, so you know, like it's just like, and and so, you know, and then there's like that whole like taking it into the grunt work aspect of it. I mean, I'm there now because I've got, you know, whatever, 30,000 images I have to go through to coordinate. But one other thing that you said that makes me think of another really important lesson that has come out of my work in the medium of water, you know, in the dimension of water, and is that you can influence the fabric. So you're in this, imagine this huge body of static water, right? You're in a huge pool,
Mhm.
diving well, and you can go like this with your arm, and the fabric will have a response. But like it's going to do things that you can't control because it's
Mm.
responding to like what's happening in the water. And it's
Mhm.
so beautiful to see it unfold on film. And also hair, if you just go like if there's a way to kind of move the hair, and you can sort of know that it's going to go like this, but then if you settle your head, then maybe the hair does this, and you know, you just don't know.
Mhm.
And so one of the greatest lessons that I think is connected to this is that, like, you know, like you can't control every aspect of what's going to emerge or what this vision
Sure.
is for this entrepreneurial project that you have, but you can enter into a space that is like a dance where you are willing and you have an intention and you have a
Mhm.
desire and a voice, but you're not willfully imposing yourself on every aspect of it. And I think that that is just a beautiful visual lesson and tactile experience that I've had underwater that
Wow.
really bears some importance for this concept of creating projects and entrepreneurship.
big lesson. I just kind of made a quote to summarize. We need to be courageous enough to have a relationship with the unknown.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Hey, hey, I'm just improvising over here. All
Yeah.
right, cool. This is awesome. So, hey, we have a few minutes left and it's amazing. Obviously, we can keep on talking about this and we have part 2 for sure. There are some students that have actually brought some questions. So let's see. Alexa, you want to read your question?
Yeah, let's see. So I was wondering, was there ever a point where there's a struggle between your creative side and entrepreneurial sense? And if so, how did you come to resolve it?
Yeah, I think that's like an ongoing dynamic balance struggle. Like we were talking about, like sometimes you're in a season in a project, let's say, where you just the feeling of inspiration, the high of it, isn't there, because what you're really needing to do is just grunt work. You have got to like make those folders, you've got to label those images, and that's really hard. And then there are other times where you're dealing with the muse, if you want to call it that, the energy and the excitement. But that can be so overwhelming because you're just one person, or you have this idea and you have no idea, where you're going to start. And so I think that that is like a constant dynamic tension, kind of a yin and a yang thing, where you're sort of like pushing this way, pushing that way, and then the whole thing is just, you're on a unicycle kind of thing. I don't know if that is a simple way of answering your question that's helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a dynamic tension. And I think we like to organize things in a way that makes us feel like, okay, I'm going to be inspired, and then I'm going to, and that's where the illusion comes in, because when people watch this video, for example, this film, they're not going to know about the struggle of the fabric underwater, and the breath holding and all the challenges. It's hopefully going to put them in a world of like a fantasy world, until
Sure.
I break through that mirror, that frame, and grab the audience and shake them for a second to say, hey, I'm underwater.
Yeah. Hey, let's see. I think we have a couple other questions, and I'd like to get to them. So Blitz answers, Blitz, because we'll have time for part 2 of this. Let's see. Yeah, I think Kate, I think she answered, how have these projects advanced yourself as an entrepreneur?
I'm not sure that they've advanced me as an entrepreneur. I don't know about the word advanced.
Yeah.
I could see how it'd be I could see how that'd be perceived that way. I would say that when you do certain things, you can then put them in a bio and put them in a something, and then that becomes part of your identity as a professional. And then perhaps in the case of all the different kinds of music entrepreneurship that's out there, that becomes what you're known for doing, and then you get your gigs doing that. I don't think I'm going to be like hired as a mermaid, so I don't know how. I don't.
Well, yeah,
I
I would say
at this season of my life, I'm just like, all I want to
sure.
do is just like express and create, and not be like pigeoned into having to do anything I don't want to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think just to answer Kate's question, the way I would translate maybe your stage is deals with this concept of vertical impact versus horizontal impact, which oftentimes, there's a struggle, or this desire to want to be an entrepreneur, but it's also, when you're younger, you need to establish some sense of financial security, and then there's the whole competition in making establishing an identity, and just, getting people to want to call you and that stuff. But you're not at that stage anymore. You've already done that, and so you're more focused on horizontal impact, which is, outreach. But it's also horizontal, meaning first reaching this way, and then ultimately reaching the other way, which is actually a blissful state of consciousness to be as an entrepreneur, because you just aren't concerned necessarily with consumer interest. I mean, there will be consumer interest, but consumers is not necessarily like the end all be all. Like I must exist to please the consumer. No. You have a inviting approach to what it is to be an entrepreneur, which is in entrepreneurship that's called the pull principle as opposed to the push principle.
Interesting.
Right there.
Yeah,
and you do that with your heart. So
one thing I really think is important to share, especially with all of the various walks of life that are with us here listening today, and I share this with my students all the time, and that is, you need to really honor the season of life that you're in, and not only the season of life, because half the time I'm like, well, what season of life am I in? The season of the day, every aspect of the circadian rhythm of your day and your month and your year, and like trust where you are. And it's so hard to do when you're young, especially when you don't know if there's a place for you in the world. There is a place. And if you have a desire to be something, a desire to do something, the reason it will happen is because that desire is in you. That is a seed. And the reason you have the desire is because it wants to emerge. And so it's easy to be afraid when you're younger. And that's where following the templates, doing the work, getting the degrees, whatever it might be, the metrics of it, that provides a certain aspect of safety. But while you're in that season and while you're dealing with those metrics and learning to excel at them, keep asking yourself, where is my voice? What wants to emerge? Because you can hold that dynamic present, and then you can come into this space of time where you're established and stable, and you can spend 100 hours underwater waving around a bunch of fabric if you feel like it.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, we have to be bold, and that's actually the difference between what it is just to do business or to actually be an entrepreneur, is that even by definition, it does require informed testing, or another word for that would be just informed risk. We have to pilot test. We have to actually be okay with the fact that it might not go exactly the way we expected it, which, that's okay, because failure is like a compass that actually redirects our path to be able to refine that product, which is essentially birthed out of us,
Yeah,
so,
and I think another important takeaway is like be a lifelong learner. You mentioned like failure or whatever, and I think of like last week we had a session underwater where we were trying to rig 750 square feet of fabric underwater in a pool that had jets that they couldn't turn the jets off because of the type of pool it was. And we had to completely like abort the whole, and it was 3 hours of like 2 hours of rigging, and then getting in the costume, and then underwater, and then and it was really disappointing. But the thing is, be a lifelong learner. Everything you do is about learning. Be voracious, stoke that flame of fire. And, it all comes kind of together. It's not really about failure. It's just about like seeing things from different perspectives of the kaleidoscope,
No, there's so much to life that is just amazing. And I think if we take the time to be able to protect our space, then we can dwell in that space to be able to enjoy the wonders. And in doing so, we can ultimately become ruined for the ordinary and obsessed with the pursuit of wonder. Life is another one of my quotes.
No, I love that. Yeah, ruin the ordinary.
No, it's all good. Hey, y'all, thank you so much. Thank you. And all the emojis. Let's get it going. Happening for Nina. Woohoo! Yeah. I don't think I honestly could have had a better presenter for the Preservation of Humanity unit theme in this class. Social impact of music entrepreneurs. Of course, to all the students, I will follow up with an email, but thank you all so much. And thank you for all the guests. Absolutely. Yeah, it was great to see you all. And, they all see me in action from a musical perspective, but This is how I teach. I just ask questions and
Awesome.
awkward jokes all the time, dad jokes. All right, everybody. Take care. Thank you so much again.
Thanks.